Segue. To continue at once with the next musical selection or composition.
Segue. To make a transition directly from one section or theme to another.
To move smoothly and unhesitatingly from one state, situation, condition, or element to another.
Segue. To perform in the manner of the preceding section.
Segue. To make a transition from one thing to another smoothly and without interruption.
This is Segue with Dean Aldemaro Romero, a weekly program exploring the lives and work of the people of the College of Arts and Sciences at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville.
Hello everybody. Dr. Kyong Yoo was born in Seoul, South Korea. He received his bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees in environmental sciences at the University of Massachusetts in Amsterdam. Today, he is an assistant professor in the environmental sciences program at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. Welcome to Segue, Dr. Yoon.
Thank you for having me today.
Now, you work on insects. You
Yes.
work on things related to agriculture, to human health, and all that kind of things. Now, the relationship between insects and agriculture is a long one in the history of humanity, but it's a one that has had kind of two sides. One is the positive impact of insects on agriculture, but the other one is the problems that these monocultures create by allowing many more insects that we should have around to be around. So my question to you is, with the growing size of the human population and the growing need for food, do you think we will ever achieve a kind of coexistence where there is an equilibrium between the needs of the two?
Yes, I think it's a good question, and then I've been trying to dealing with this question during my professional career. And it's a good question, but it's hard to answer because there are a lot of different situations. And then we are yet trying to control this insect pest as much as we can, and then try to produce more food. But the problem is insects are not that, they're also evolved into this thing called insecticide resistance. So once we use this pesticide without thinking a smarter way, then they will develop into the resistance. And then it's going to be the continuous problem. And then this chemical company try to develop a new chemical. That takes a lot of time and energy and money.
Now, a lot of people don't realize that without insects, agriculture probably won't be possible.
That's true too, right? So we use honeybees for pollinators, and then monoculture specifically, depending on this bee pollinated the agriculture system. So without insects, we're going to have a hard time in agriculture.
By the same token, plants provide food for insects.
Right. So we're competing with insects.
Yeah. Okay. Now, you have also studied the issue of head lice in humans. And when we say lice, I don't think most people realize that, because most people only hear about the head lice in humans, that there are about, 3,000 species of lice in the world?
Yeah, there are a lot of lice species around the world, and the most parasitic lice are host-specific. And human, we have 3 different forms of lice, and then one of them is head lice. And then we have very close body lice. And then there's some distant relatives called crab lice.
Mm-hmm.
So these 3 lice we have evolved with, and they particularly head and body lice are pretty close to each other. In fact, that they're the same species.
Mm-hmm.
They share over 99% of their genome identity, and then when they interbreed, they can produce completely photoprogenious. So there are same species, but they are different ecotypes. People believe that the body lice have been diverged from head lice about 70,000 years ago, when humans start wearing clothes. So the head lice, at the time, they see the opportunity to explore, expand their niche from head to their human body. So they didn't go that far, but the time that they've been separated, they give enough opportunity to develop different phenotypes. So body lice can transmit disease, where the same time the head lice, we don't know yet, but we know that there is no clinical evidence that head lice transmit disease.
According to some DNA studies I have read, it has been traced back the human lice to the lice in gorillas. And apparently that was something that jumped from gorillas to humans happened about 3 million years ago, which shows that there has been a long history of lice in humans.
Oh, yes. The gorilla has the particular lice that are very similar to crab lice. We also call this human pubic lice. But head lice and body lice are more similar to chimpanzee lice. So we have like a different lineage of these two main different lineage of the lice. But it's been really, really old that we start, co-evolve with these two different head lice and the pubic lice. So yeah, it's very long relationship.
Now, some people don't really understand issues like how lice are transmitted from one human to another, and there are even some myth about that kind of things. Maybe you can clarify to our audience exactly how is the transmission of lice from one person to another.
So it could be many different ways, but because after World War II, people, mostly developed country, they don't have a lice problem anymore. So they kind of stopped the study. And then we have still poor understanding about the behavior of these insects. But most insects have chemosensory, so they can get attracted to certain chemosens, and then they can also
chemical substances.
Right. They can also to deter by different chemical substances. So people trying to develop some sort of repellents specific to this head and body lice, but we are at the very beginning stage of trying to understand the behavior of this unique insect.
Now, some people may also ask, why lice like human hair? What's the reason for them to feel that this, what you call an ecotype, that is a habitat for the lice, is the ideal habitat is human hair?
So since you mentioned it earlier that we started this relationship long time ago, that's even humans start wearing clothes. So the time that we don't have any clothes on, they probably hang on to our hair, and then they liked it there. So that's probably why they like to grab our hair, and then their tarsi, their leg is very specialized to grab human hair.
Okay. Now, in terms of geographic areas, what would you say are the parts of the world where human lice are more prevalent, and why?
So it's been thought that where you have the sanitation problem or social problem or disaster area, you see all of a sudden there is outbreaks of head and body lice. But we think that there probably some reservoir all the time, and then this the bad situation happen, then lice can see the opportunity, so they can expand their population size. That means that human can no longer maintain their sanitation, so they can try to explore more habitat-wise. They can transmit more. But in case of the head lice, is little different. The body lice can be found mostly in the urban area. The homeless people can harbor it, but head lice seems they don't care, so they kind of like to infest school-age children, and then it is a big problem among elementary school around the world.
Would you say that tropical countries are more prone to have these problems, or really doesn't matter in terms of latitude?
It doesn't really matter. Particularly, we've been trying to control these head lice from try to treat the infested school children. So this lice developed into resistance to these chemicals. And then once they develop the resistance, they can spread pretty quick. They don't have wings, they don't have jumping legs, but they move around, as we move around. Mm-hmm. So now we live in a very open society. Like you can go to anywhere in the globe within 24 hours. So head lice can move around all the way around within 24 hours too.
Now, some people may also ask, is there any way we can prevent to be infected by human lice?
Yeah, we've been trying to control and then trying to repel, to use the chemical, trying to kill the lice and trying to repel the lice. But it seems that they're not going to go away for a short amount of time.
So can we say that the chemicals that we have manufactured by pharmaceutical companies are not 100% effective?
Initially, if you develop a good product, it could give you very good potency and efficacy. But again, these creatures can evolve into to develop a resistance to this chemical eventually. So my answer is, we can try hard, but it's going to be very hard, and then these insects are very smart.
Mm-hmm. Now, what I have also read is that the problem with some of the chemicals that we have produced, they may have secondary effects on human health in some cases.
Yeah, we've been using some chemicals that are also we historically we use some chlorine-based chemical for agricultural usage, and then one of the chemical we've used it as a pediculicide, meaning that we formulated that particular pesticide to control the head lice. And then there are a lot of some health issues among school children. So they try not to use it anymore. And then the product widely available is pretty safe. The active ingredient, the chemical name called pyrethroids. These are synthetic chemical from the pyrethrum, which is the natural pyrethrins. This chemical is pretty safe to human beings, but if you misuse or overuse, there could be some problem.
Mm-hmm. You know, when we were talking about the evolution of human lice, I was wondering if the lice in the American continent was brought by the indigenous people who came from Asia to the American continent, or was brought here by the Europeans who brought, by the way, a lot of diseases to America? What was the way that lice got into this continent?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question, but like I said, we are very mobile these days. So majority of the lice that we brought probably from Europe, because we start seeing the resistant problem in European countries. And then several years after, we start seeing the problems in schools of our backyards. So I think that majority of the resistant lice are from Europe or different very developed countries.
Mm-hmm. And since it originated in Africa, essentially also probably when they were bringing this, slaves from Africa here, there was also some another way of infestation.
Sure, it's possible, and human beings always carrying this lice. This lice particularly, but to start with, these lice must be sensitive to this chemical. So I've been trying to study the resistance in head lice particularly, and then we see similar patterns what happened in Europe about 20 years ago, and then in the U.S. we start seeing the very high resistance about 10 years ago. So it's kind of similar pattern happened in Europe, be followed by this kind of trend.
Mm-hmm.
So this resistant lice probably coming from developed country already use a lot of this pyrethroid-based chemical.
Now, to make sure that people understand how lice, as well as any other living organism that produces a disease for which we have developed some kind of a cure, become resistant, is through a process that we know as natural selection. That is, we try to kill many of them, but a few of them that are genetically strong enough to survive that, they then pass on the next generations that ability, and that's why we have flu every year, because the genetic material of the flu virus keeps changing every year.
That's right. So among Laos general population, they have their own variabilities, and then they could have spontaneous mutations. So when we have certain selection pressure, let's say we're using certain chemicals for how many years, then that selection pressure drive their variability to adapt to this chemical. So that's when you see the phenotypically resistant lice. And then if you keep using it, you're going to end up having homozygote resistant populations.
So populations that are genetically very similar, and therefore they are not killed by these chemicals.
Correct. It's a pretty similar to agricultural situation. When you have a new product, new chemical product, you can start using it. It has a good potency, good efficacy. So you can control this insect pest pretty well, but you are not killing 100% of the insects. Mm. So the survivors must have some sort of resistant gene in their gene, and then they can reproduce a lot faster, and then all of a sudden you have a resistant insect pest everywhere.
Now, based on all this, I mean, the sad conclusion for many people may be, well, that means we'll never get rid of human lice, because no matter what we do, there will be always a portion of them surviving that will pass on to next generations that resistance. Is that true, or do we need a new time of new technology in order to get rid of lice?
Well, we are trying to develop new chemicals, new way to control lice. And then since we have this resistance problem, very recently, pharmaceutical companies have developed new products. But I would say it's going to be a very hard battle. And my major professor and I were one time joking around. If you want to try to control this head lice, we could probably shave our head at one time. Then maybe we can get rid of the problem. But until that time, well, we cannot probably get rid of the lice completely.
And tell that to children to shave their heads, particularly to female
right.
children.
Right. It's going to be a lot of problems.
So that's it's not going to happen. Okay, so let's go back a little bit to the issue of agriculture and insects. The first time that humans have heard about the issue of insects and agriculture comes to the biblical times when they talk about the plagues and everything else. Does that mean that from the time humans started to develop these large cultures of a single species, that is a monoculture, maybe about 10,000 years ago or so, from the very beginning, the insects started to take advantage of the fact that there was all these homogeneous type of plants there, so we don't need to really develop anything special in order to eat?
Well, that's a good question. Maybe it's a mixed bag. Some insects probably like to stay where they see the monoculture of certain crops. And then some insects may be, they don't like the particular crop, so they probably went away. But those insects remain in agriculture area, they could most likely become pest insects of us. And it's pretty, population genetics can tell us where these insects are moving, and then the way that we could deal with is probably that long time ago we also start using the chemical, inorganic chemical, to control these insects, but they can adapt pretty fast because they have a very short lifetime, and compared to our lifetime, so they have a more flexibility than human beings.
And the problem, of course, is with many of these chemicals that they can be harmful to the environment, because they usually not kill only that particular insect, but they kill many other forms of wildlife, but also to human health. And I think the most famous case was with DDT, right, that was banned in the 60s because it had this deleterious effect on wildlife, making the shells of the eggs of many birds thinner and all that sort of things. So it seems that we are kind of trapped in that we're trying to solve a problem, and then the solution creates other problems.
Right. So it's so people try not to use chemical in agriculture. The organic food, that's kind of expensive, so we cannot feed human population that way. We have to use chemical to produce enough food. So we, as a scientist, try to develop the smarter way to use chemical. And then in agriculture, we call it is resistant management, or the integrated pest management, IPM. That could have different ways of utilize this chemical. We can say the rotation. We have like a different chemistry of this chemical, so we can use the rotation fashion, so insect cannot develop the resistance to particular class of insecticides. And also we have this practice called refugee area, try to protect the heterozygote and susceptible insects. In refugee area, you don't treat the pesticide there, so you can protect some gene flow. so they don't become instantaneously to the homozygote resistance insects. That way, we could plan more sustainable agriculture, where if you don't care about this kind of practice, then you can increase the resistance problem more dramatically.
Okay. I remember when DDT was banned in many developed countries, that some developing countries said, no, we need to still use it because our conditions are different than yours. Do you agree with that idea?
And this is, I think that's true, and then that's why WHO let certain African countries,
the World Health Organization,
right? They allowed to African country to use the control the malaria problem, and then at this time the usage of the DDT is more careful. It's not like indiscriminate way of the use like we did before. It's more controlled way that we can use this chemical so that we can protect our environment, and then also we can protect our health, try to control the malaria transmitting mosquitoes.
Okay. Well, in the minute or so that we have left, tell us about your next big project, what you are working on now.
I am interested in a lot of different things, but I would like to try the relationship between low concentration exposure of these pesticides and the metabolic syndrome that we have now, like type 2 diabetes and obesities. So one of my collaborators in University of Massachusetts Food Science Department, we've been trying to get this research going, and then hopefully we can find some new mechanism why this low level of exposure could cause or more enhance the obesity or type 2 diabetes.
Well, and who said that an entomologist like you, who is a person who studies insects, doesn't study things that are really important for humans? So I wanted to thank Dr. Kyong Yoo for this very interesting conversation about insects, society, agriculture, lice, and you name it. So thank you very much for coming to our show. And next week, we're going to have a group of Chinese scholars who are visiting Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville, who are going to be talking about their experiences here. So stay tuned.
This has been Segue with Dean Aldemaro Romero, a production of the Department of Mass Communications at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. All rights reserved, 2014.